What's up, Falcons Nation? It's your boy Jew coming at you with another Atlanta Falcons video. As always, Falcons Nation, rise up. In today's video, I'd like to give my thoughts on the Atlanta Falcons' first padded practice at training camp. But if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you'll know when I've done Atlanta Falcons content. Hit that like button for your boy. I do appreciate each and every one of you guys for your continued support, continuing to share out my content on all the social media platforms. If you'd like to follow your boy on Twitter and Instagram, you can follow me at Jew Talk Sports. If you'd like to donate to my channel, you can donate to my Cash App, which is the $ Jew Talk Sports. And if you'd like to be a part of my Jew Talk Sports membership, you can hit that join tab here on the channel as well. But with that being said, let's jump right into the video. So today, the Atlanta Falcons did have their first padded practice at training camp. And I just want to give a couple of players that stood out and a couple things that stood out to me at practice today. The first thing that I want to talk about is Zach Harrison, the defensive end out of Ohio State that we drafted this season. He played really well or looked really well at training camp today during the one-on-one drills where they basically had each player going one-on-one in the trenches. And he had one play where he put one of the offensive linemen, Mike Vrabel's son, in the weight room. He basically bull rushed him and knocked him over. And it was a really good rep for Zach Harrison. For what I'm hearing coming out of training camp, Zach Harrison is one of those guys that's impressing the coaches. Today, Arthur Smith did say that Zach Harrison is one of those guys that could possibly be a starter for this Atlanta Falcons team, depending on how well he plays during these preseason games and how well he continues to perform at camp. But he says that he has a very high ceiling and that he thinks that he could be a really, really good defensive lineman in the NFL. And so far, from everything that I'm hearing from all of the reporters and all of the coaches that are out there at training camp, they're pretty much stating that Zach Harrison is turning a lot of heads. He's one of those guys that will get snaps this season, possibly on this defensive line for our Atlanta Falcons. So I really think that is not going to bode well for certain players like Ade Ogundeji, some of the guys that we've had on this roster for a while that really haven't produced. I really feel like if guys like Zach Harrison, starts to develop really fast, he could end up being one of those guys that takes some of these guys that we had on the roster the last 2 years. He could be one of those guys that's going to take those guys' spots because we brought in guys like Bud Dupree. We still have Lorenzo Carter on this roster. So I really feel like Zach Harrison is going to push Ade Ogundeji for that defensive end spot / outside linebacker spot, especially being one of those guys that can set the edge, because Zach Harrison is one of those guys that's a bigger defensive lineman, similar to Ade Ogundeji. But also today at camp, what stood out was Drake London. He was one of those guys. He went up one-on-one against Clark Phillips. Those guys have been battling it out. Iron sharpens iron, and those guys have been going at it at training camp over the first week of training camp. And today, Drake London got the better of Clark Phillips when he high-pointed a ball that was thrown to him during the one-on-one drills. And if you guys have been watching, both Clark Phillips and Drake London have really been going at it. Those guys have history going back to college when Drake London was at USC and when Clark Phillips was at Utah. They went up against each other multiple times. So those guys have really been battling it out, but it's only going to make those guys better players. And every day at camp, either Clark Phillips make a play or Drake London makes a play, but it's about moving on to the next rep, and it's about continuing to get better. And I really feel like those guys are making each other stronger, and both of those guys are going to be better for it at the end of this training camp. But Clark Phillips had been getting the better of Drake London, but today Drake London got some payback during those one-on-one drills with a nice play where he mossed it over Clark Phillips. But another player that really has stood out so far in training camp was Bijan Robinson. He continues to ball out. And like I've mentioned before, in these one-on-one drills, Bijan Robinson is going to get the better of any linebacker or possibly any safety or corner in today's NFL, because Bijan Robinson is supreme athlete. And today he did go up against Caden Ellis in one-on-one drills, and he made a nice cutback route where basically it was like a jerk route where he went in and went back out, and he pretty much burned Caden Ellis. He was kind of flat-footed trying to stay with Bijan Robinson, but I really feel like Bijan Robinson is going to be a mismatch nightmare for any linebacker, any safety, or even he's going to give some corners problems because Bijan Robinson is very shifty, and he continues to show that at camp that he's one of the better athletes out there. And I really feel like it's going to be really, really tough for anybody to cover him, especially linebackers and safeties. He's going to be a mismatch nightmare, and he continues to ball out at camp. Also today at camp, Matt Bergeron, our rookie left guard, he did really well in one-on-one drills as well. He held his own when he went up against Taquan Graham, who was one of the breakout players for us last year before he got injured against the Chicago Bears last season. But they went up in those one-on-one drills against each other, and Matt Bergeron pretty much held his own. He did a pretty good job of stonewalling Taquan Graham, which we know Taquan Graham is a really strong athlete, one of the strongest players on our Atlanta Falcons roster. And Matt Bergeron pretty much held his own as a rookie. He was able to win that rep in those one-on-one drills. And from what I'm hearing out of camp and from Arthur Smith, he's really impressed with Matthew Bergeron and what he's doing as far as him being with the starters since Matt Hennessy got injured. So I'm really interested to see how well Matt Bergeron plays in the first preseason game and in these preseason games, because we know doing one-on-one drills is one thing, but being able to gel with the other four guys that's on that offensive line is really going to be key to see, how well Matt Bergeron is going to catch on with those guys, how fast those guys can develop chemistry is going to be really important. So I've been impressed so far from what I'm hearing out of Matthew Bergeron. I knew coming out of Syracuse that he was one of those guys that our scout team really went after, and they really liked him, and that's the reason they traded up for him in the second round. So I'm very interested to see how he performs during live games in the preseason, and see how well he plays with the other four veteran guys that we now have on our offensive line. But with that being said, that's pretty much all of the things that I've seen today at camp. For the most part, those were the guys that really stood out today at camp. And, out of the couple plays that I got to see, those are the guys that so far in today's camp during the first padded practice, those guys really stood out. But the main thing that I'm taking from the camp so far, this training camp, is that the Falcons are really developing our defensive line and offensive line, and we've gotten a lot better on our defensive line and our offensive line, and we're a lot deeper in the trenches. From what I'm hearing, from the reporters that's there, from the fans that are going out there and watching these players, and what I'm hearing from the coaches like Arthur Smith and Ryan Nielsen, they've been really impressed with these guys in the trenches. It sounds like we're going to be very violent in the trenches, which Arthur Smith wants, and I really feel like that's the ethos of this team. And that is the foundation of this Atlanta Falcons team with this new regime, is developing that offensive line and defensive line, and beating teams in the trenches is really going to be our bread and butter. And where we hang our hat or hang our helmet is going to be in the trenches. So I've been really impressed, not only with just the trenches on the defensive side of the ball, but also the offensive line, and also just the defensive secondary as a whole. I've been hearing some good things coming out of our defensive secondary as well. They've been getting their hands on a lot of footballs. Clark Phillips has been one of those guys that has come away with a lot of interceptions. Jeff Okudah is one of those guys that came over from Detroit that's been doing really well at camp as well, from what I'm hearing. And guys like AJ Terrell, Jalen Hawkins, like, we're really deep on this defense in that secondary. So hearing a lot of great things, coming out of camp. But with that being said, I'm gonna have a lot more content coming for you guys. As always, Falcons Nation, rise up. If you haven't hit that subscribe button for your boy, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you'll know when I've done Atlanta Falcons content. But with that being said, as always, Falcons Nation, rise up, be blessed, peace.